We keep hearing demands for bipartisan agreement here in Washington, D.C. Why can't the two parties set aside all of their anger and suspicions and get together and get things done? And now, frankly, I'm sort of suspicious of all that talk. I like partisanship. It lets me know where people stand. That said, yesterday we actually had a bipartisan bill make its way to the president's desk. Both parties, Republicans and Democrats, agreed on certain provisions about ESG provisions for funding, for investments for certain government agencies, and the president vetoed it. The president vetoed it. He stood by ESG woke ideology and thumbed his nose at bipartisanship in Washington, D.C. Wow, that tells you how strong the forces are behind the ESG movement. Joining us now is Hild. He's the Executive Director of Consumer Research. And we've talked about ESG before and how this sort of thing, it's equity. Remind me what it is again.
It stands for environmental, social, and governance.
That's even better. All right. It's always these insidious initials that always drive me crazy. Describe again exactly what this was going to do for the federal government and why the president vetoed it.
Certainly. Well, it was a rule that's been passed by the Biden administration's Department of Labor, which has oversight over private pension regulation here in the United States. And basically what the rule said is it overturned nearly 100 years of precedent, saying that people who are overseeing private pensions can consider factors in making their investments that do not relate to the return for shareholders. So in other words, your pension fund manager could inject his own politics, his own political calculations into the ways in which he manages your pension. And what Congress said is, in a bipartisan fashion, that's not a good rule. That's not a good idea. We need to make sure that these managers are fulfilling their fiduciary duty.
Right, and this is critically important because this is like Taft-Hartley pension funds, if you remember that. This is all to ensure that especially labor union-related pension and annuity funds don't go bankrupt. There are certain rules there where if you're sitting as a trustee on these boards, you're supposed to make the smartest decision for the investments. What this new rule from the Department of Labor basically has said was, you can make a bad investment and that's okay as long as you do it to help the environment. That's basically what they were saying.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And these were hard-fought rules put in place by the labor movement because you had companies mismanaging their pension funds for their workers and then saying, whoops, oh, well, what are you going to do? And so these rules were put in place so that you have a right to sue when your pension fund is mismanaged, when they don't follow the fiduciary duty that includes both a duty of loyalty, meaning they can't have a conflict of interest, but also a duty of care, meaning they have to do basic due diligence on the investments that they make. And even the funds that they pick.
Yeah.
And basically this rule upends that and makes it so, let's say they bankrupt your pension fund with stupid investments. They can say, well, we were trying to help the world. What do you want?
Right.
And so this is a really bad thing for workers.
By the way, sure, they can say they were trying to help the world, but they could also be directly benefiting from those investments as well. They could have their own private holdings, these trustees, if they wanted to. The whole reason for these oversight rules that forced trustees to make the wisest, soundest financial decisions for these funds is so that they don't feather their own bed, so that they don't actually get caught up in any corruption. Joe Biden's just basically opened the door for corruption.
Yeah, it's incredible. And it's funny because you hear him making quite a quasi-free market argument for why this rule was a good idea. But why don't you want these people to just be able to use whatever information's at their hand? And of course, he strips of all context the idea that this is a basic fundamental of common law. When you hire a lawyer, your lawyer has a fiduciary duty to you. When you hire a doctor, your doctor has a fiduciary duty to you. When you hire an investment manager, they should have a fiduciary duty to you. And that's all this the existing law previous to the Biden administration said, is that they have a specific set of requirements that they have to fulfill when they're investing on your behalf. And what Biden wants to do is basically hand this off to his lackeys on Wall Street and say, just do whatever you want with other people's money.
Hild, I want you to respond specifically to the tweet that President Biden's office put out for this veto, celebrating this veto, bragging about this veto, is particularly odious. I just vetoed my first bill. This bill would risk your retirement savings by making it illegal to consider risk factors MAGA House Republicans don't like. Boy, I'll pause there for a moment. Let's start just with that sentence here. Let's remind everybody, Democrats voted for this too.
Absolutely. I think psychologists have a term called projection, when you yourself accuse others of doing the thing that you are doing. he's basically saying that Republicans are trying to politicize pension fund investment. And that is the opposite of what's happening here. They are saying, along with 2 Democratic senators, that we need to keep politics out of the management of people's pension funds.
Yeah.
They don't have a say, generally speaking, in how these funds are managed. And so we put some very strict legal restrictions on the people doing it to make sure they focus on their attention on the returns for the shareholders, make sure they have a comfortable, safe retirement. And what Biden administration is doing is saying they want to do away with all that so that their woke lackeys on Wall Street can have a free hand to use your money to push their value.
Let's be clear here. Under this bill, this bipartisan bill that the president vetoed, it had it gone into law, if a pension fund for a labor union made an investment in some green energy company and it ended up being a great investment, there's nothing prohibiting them from making that investment, right? They can do that. All Biden has ensured here is if it's a lousy investment, the members of the union have no recourse because all the trustees can say is, oh, well, we were doing it to save the planet.
Absolutely, you're correct. There is absolutely nothing about the existing fiduciary duty previous to the Biden administration meddling with it.
Right.
It would have precluded any kind of profitable investment in any kind of green tech. You can make a sustainable case of why this is going to turn a profit.
I'm sure these funds hold tons of stock in Tesla right now. Nothing prohibited them from doing that.
Absolutely nothing at all. And any profitable investment should be pursued. What this rule basically says is that you don't have to consider only what they call pecuniary factors, meaning you can just start adding in all kinds of factors that have nothing to do with returns to the shareholder.
Outrageous. The other part of the tweet is actually just as offensive. Because this is good old bipartisan Joe Biden, he's the guy who likes to get along. Again, he vetoed a bipartisan bill. And then he said this: your plan manager should be able to protect your hard-earned savings, whether Representative Marjorie Taylor Greene likes it or not. Singling out one member of Congress in particular, while Joe Manchin, Democrat senator, also voted for this sort of thing. That's really, really wrong, isn't it, to do that? Trump would never do that.
100%. I think your point about the fact that he didn't mention Senators Tester and Manchin really speaks to what ESG really is, which is a shifting of investment capital to unprofitable companies and industries that basically exist in the coastal elite areas of the country, like Wall Street and California, Silicon Valley. We've certainly seen what's going on in that space right now with the banking. And it hurts middle of the country heartland states, even the ones represented by Democrats like West Virginia and Montana. And so that's why you've seen those senators cross the aisle in order to fight back against this rule, because this is really an economic civil war on their states, along with a lot of the middle of the rest of the country that was obviously represented mostly by Republicans, rightly so. So it really is, he's trying to single out one person that he thinks will be particularly egregious to his party, but he doesn't want to mention all the people that crossed the aisle in order to push back against this attack on those states' economy.
You mentioned in your tweet about this, we only have 30 seconds, BlackRock, State Street, Vanguard. This basically lets all of those major players on Wall Street go to a pension fund and say, go ahead and make your investment, even if it's a loser, doesn't matter, because you've got the law to protect you. That's a hell of a loophole, Hild, a hell of a loophole.
Absolutely. We
got to leave it there. Thank you, though, for shedding light on this. I venture to say that most cable news networks didn't spend a whole lot of time on this story yesterday, and it's a stunning one and an important one. Thanks for lending your intelligence to it. There's more to come on O'Connor Tonight. Keep it here. It's Salem News Channel.